Recently, there's been a lot of focus on the riots in the UK, and being British, that's been a big part of my channel recently. I've covered it in about 4 videos, I think. Um, but there has been trouble elsewhere in the world, of course there has, but particularly thinking of Bangladesh, it puts things in context when people talk about a war in the UK. We had the awful deaths of those young girls, but there hasn't been any deaths, thankfully, in the riots themselves. Now, in the situation in Bangladesh, uh, up to 500 people have died. That's kind of puts it in context, i.e., it's a serious situation in the UK, but talk of war is hyperbole. I'm not saying it's war in Bangladesh either, but it's clearly a very, very bloody situation there. Nigeria has also seen violent protests, which is why I think it's a bit ironic for the Nigerian Foreign Ministry to issue travel advice to the UK. Over 20 people have died in the violence in Lagos. Um, so I want to talk about the situation in Bangladesh. When I took part in the peace walk in Sunderland, we ended up in Sunderland Central Mosque, and Sunderland has quite a big Bangladeshi community. Uh, the Bangladeshi diaspora here is one of our biggest minority groups, and I remember a woman in the mosque was talking about the situation in Bangladesh, talk about praying for that situation. I was sort of loosely familiar with what was going on, but only, honestly didn't know much about it. So since then, I've kind of done a little bit of homework. Um, and, events move very quickly. There was massive demonstrations in Dhaka, um, and there was turbulent scenes as Sheikh Hasina fled the country. Hasina has been described by many Bangladeshis as basically a dictator. She was prime minister from 1996 to 2001, and then again from 2009 to 2024. Those scenes of the protesters, rioters, call them what you will, going through her mansion, taking away items, very much reminded me of the scenes in Sri Lanka in 2022. Very similar. Again, there were scenes of looting and so on during that. Now, I want to be clear, it's not my right to lecture people in Bangladesh. I'm not on the ground. I don't know the strength of feelings there. My understanding is the protests were a combination of people fed up with Hasina's rule, um, and also the perception that the government quotas were discriminatory, i.e., they favoured those who were descendants of veterans of the 1971 war, very costly war, but this was discriminatory to young Bangladeshis. It's a very young country. The thing about this crisis is that it kind of illuminates the problems that a lot of growing countries face. By growing countries, I mean countries with big populations. You know, it's Bangladesh I'm talking about, but it may as well be Nigeria or Pakistan or other countries that have that sort of situation. India, indeed, has no shortage of challenges. And often where there's young populations, those challenges are galvanized with young people obviously having aspirations. Now, the widely respected Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus has taken over as a caretaker prime minister. He's widely respected, but he is 80 years old, so it's going to be an interim position. He's already spoken about trying to live up to the aspirations of young Bangladeshis. There is things that need to be addressed. When a leader has been in power for so long, incidentally, Hasina has apparently went to Delhi. The Indian government's given her refuge, but that's going to be. There's somewhat contradictory messages from India regarding Sheikh Hasina. On one hand, Modi's party hasn't shied away from presenting Bangladesh as a hotbed of Islamism. On the other hand, in Bangladesh itself, Hasina's party is being seen as pro-India, her Awami League party. But there's been troubling reports of attacks on the Hindu minority. I'm just going to read out this report from the I newspaper. Um, this is by Taz Ali. Hundreds of Bangladeshi Hindus have attempted to flee to India after homes and businesses of the minority community were vandalised following the overthrow of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Hindus, who make up 8% of Bangladesh's Muslim majority population, have long been perceived as supporters of Ms Hasina's Awami League party, which was ousted from government on Monday after weeks of deadly protests led by a student movement. I should say this paper's from Saturday. Ms Hasina is seeking refuge in India, having resigned and fled Dhaka, igniting anger among Bangladeshis towards her bigger neighbour. Rahul, this is a pseudonym, or it's not his real name, said his family in the Bangladeshi capital Dhaka was on edge, fearing that a Hindu temple close by may attract violent mobs who could descend on their home. There is a safety concern, and I do have this fear that this might escalate, especially when a puja, Hindu place of worship, is nearby. Rahul, a 21-year-old chemistry student, told I, my family is currently in an anxious state. For Sunil, again, this is not his real name, 21, in the southern city of Noakhali, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the violence has brought back memories of previous incidents of atrocities on minorities, including deadly clashes between Muslims and Hindus in 2021 when mobs torched dozens of Hindu homes and vandalised temples throughout the country. Sunil described that as the worst thing that happened in my eyes. I couldn't sleep for the last 3 nights to ensure the safety of my family, he told I. Hindus living close to the Indian border are attempting to flee, but face resistance from both sides, with Indian and Bangladeshi authorities stepping up border patrols following Ms Hasina's exit. Muhammad Rakibul Hassan, a local government official in Fakuragaon district in northwest Bangladesh, said up to 800 Hindus has tried to cross the border to India after some homes were looted. Bangladeshi Nobel Peace Laureate and government advisor Muhammad Yunus said violence is our enemy. Please don't create more enemies. He's widely respected, but one of his major priorities will be to reassure minorities, um, that they'll be safe. There's a lot of other things to address the anger of young people. There has to be rule of law. There has to be an address on police brutality and issues like that. And also rule of law. I don't think, no matter how angry people feel, I don't think rioting is the answer. But, maybe it's not my position to say that. But I'm looking at the scenes in Britain. I condemn the rioters here. So I'm not sure if burning cars and certainly terrorizing minorities is the right way forward for Bangladesh either. But, very serious situation, up to 500 people killed, the worst violence that country has seen since the 1971 War of Liberation, which was a very, very deadly war. Um, but Bangladesh has a population of 170 million people. It's an example of, a growing population, a densely populated country that faces many challenges. And you can look at, like I say, Nigeria, Pakistan, Ethiopia, Egypt. There's many examples of this around the world. Fast growing countries that have these sort of pressure situations, particularly with the aspirations that young people have. So, anyway, I'd like to hear from Bangladeshis. What's your thoughts on the situation in your country? If I've got anything factually wrong in this video, feel free to correct me. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Why do I show an interest? Because it's a major situation, and also my city has a Bangladeshi population. They're concerned about it. So that kind of made me think about the situation. Let me know your thoughts.